Restaurant Unstoppable. Inspire, empower, and transform the industry. With excitement, allow me to introduce to you today's guest, CEO at the Fifth Street Group, Patrick Whalen. Patrick, my man, are you feeling unstoppable today?
I'm feeling unstoppable.
Yes, dude. I cannot wait to dive into your story. I love what you guys have created. But before we dive into it, let's get that motivational, inspirational ball rolling with a success quote or mantra. What do you got for us?
Well, the easy one would be there's only we. We have that on our ceiling. But I actually like why not us? We used to say that a lot before we opened our first restaurant. Why not us? Because success always seems so far away when you don't have it. But then why would it be so hard to get to if you're working hard and you're good at your job? And so why not us? Why can't we open a restaurant group? Why can't we be successful?
Mindset, man. It's so huge. I think that's something that it's very similar to something that comes up a lot on the show. And it's just this idea of as soon as you say it can't happen to us, it's not possible, your mind shuts off and it won't happen, right? But as soon as you say why not us or how do we make it happen, that frontal lobe kicks into hyperdrive. And what's the significance of there's only we? Get into that.
There's only we was a mantra that I've actually followed a lot of my life, which is the belief that the value that you provide individually can be advanced exponentially if you're able to surround yourself with like-minded people who have a diverse offering in terms of their skill set that will complement what you're good at. So you could be great by yourself, or you could be amazing as part of a group of people. And my preference has always been to be part of a collective, ideally to lead a collective, but to be part of a collective because I think that allows us to go further long term.
Yeah. What about that person who's ready to be we, but they don't have access to we yet? They don't have the resources, but they want to become we. What's your advice for that person to get to that point where you can be we?
Well, the first resource is people. So everyone has access to other people.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm a firm believer that most of your equity in a business is by way of the human capital that populates it. And so you have access today, if someone's listening to this, you have access today to amazing people. And I think if you look around hard enough, they're there to be found if you're motivated.
Yeah. And that's a little bit of a selfish question, if I'm being honest, because I'm trying to get to the point where Restaurant Unstoppable is more of a we. I have Jared, he's amazing, but I know if to scale, you need people and cash flow, right? So like, if you're listening to this and you think what I do is cool, you got to put it out there, right? You got to let people know we're looking to grow this thing. So don't be afraid to reach out to me. And where does it make sense to share your story? Like, when did you know that this was going to be your path?
The restaurant business?
Yeah.
When I was 25, I opened a bar in Hoboken, New Jersey. That had actually been a laundromat with a liquor license, which Hoboken, New Jersey doesn't have a lot of liquor licenses, certainly not available to a 25-year-old. And so I took what I could get. I had a partner, and we opened up this sort of fly by the seat of your pants Martini Bar in a basement retail space, like I said, with washers and dryers. And it worked, and we were busy from basically minute one. Maybe I was 26, I can't remember. And it was busy from minute one. But it was very clear within a month or two of being open that I really didn't know what I was doing. I enjoyed being sort of in control and being able to make creative decisions, but I was overwhelmed with the business side of the business. And so that was a short-lived venture. I think it was like 7 or 8 months. And at which point I left that gig and realized that this is what I wanted. I wanted to be in business for myself, but I needed to learn a lot more before I was ready to go into business for myself.
So I saw that you graduated from North Carolina.
Didn't
Chapel
graduate.
Hill. Oh, you were at Chapel Hill.
I have like 150 credits. I think you need like 120 to graduate. I never passed. This is true. I never passed Spanish, intermediate Spanish. You need that for a BA.
That's kind of crazy in my mind. I mean, I don't know. But so you never graduated college.
Right.
So I see that you were there until 2003. I'm assuming you were early 20s, 2021, when you decided that college wasn't for me. I mean, to get 150 college credits, you must have been there for at least 3 years.
Yes.
Yeah. So what happened between you dropping out of college and I mean, is that the correct term? Is that what you did drop out? I don't want to make assumptions.
I mean, sure. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I think I ran away from college.
Okay.
There's a better way of dropping out. It feels like I'm dropping into an abyss, whereas I was running to New York City to try to do something else.
But I mean, I think that what's intriguing about that is here you are, pretty successful, right? And I think that there is a stigma in today's society that you need to go to college to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
And I would argue that it's almost like going to college can hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
And it hurt me. Like I'm over $200,000 in school loan debt, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it holds you back. Do you have any regrets of not finishing?
No. Do I have any regrets of not finishing?
Yeah.
No.
Why not?
Actually, that's not true. I would love to have finished for my parents. I think that they were very supportive of me throughout my educational process, and I think that they would have liked to have seen me graduate then. I don't think they care at all anymore. But beyond that, no, I have zero regrets. Because I got 150 credits. I got the college experience. I learned what I needed to learn, I suppose.
What were you learning? What was your focus?
History and political science.
Okay. Would you recommend people go to college to get into what you're doing?
To be in the restaurant business? Yeah. I don't think it hurts you. I don't think it's a necessity. It's not like if you're trying to get your MBA and go and be in banking or something. I don't think you don't need to go to college to undergrad, but it doesn't hurt to do it.
So take us to that point where you decided that college wasn't for you. What was going on?
Wasn't motivated by really anything that we were studying. Or if I would get an A+ in the class, or I would get a great grade. But that was few and far between. I felt like a lot of my college experience, I'm sure a lot of people think this, is sort of like, connecting the dots. You're just saying, okay, well, you took English 101, now you have to take English, 201 or 102 or whatever it is. And that's not me. I've never really been interested in following that kind of a path. It wasn't very creative.
Yeah.
It was a lot of, like I said, paint by numbers, and that, that's not what inspires me. That's not what motivates me. And so I struggled.
What did motivate you at this time? What was exciting for you at this time?
I mean, in college, I ran a casino out of my fraternity house. Actually, I think the statute of limitations is a few years, so I think I'm okay now. I ran a blackjack table, and I would occasionally deal craps, and I played poker all the time, and I ran it out of the fraternity house in Chapel Hill. And even though gambling has sort of a negative connotation, I was ostensibly running a business with a lot of customers.
Mm-hmm.
I actually ran lines of credit with all the people in the fraternity house.
You didn't have to break any legs, did you?
No. I never collected. I mean, if they didn't want to pay me, I guess that was up to them. But it was an interesting introduction into entrepreneurship. It was, I didn't have backers for a casino or for blackjack. I just had, maybe a few $100 cash to start, and it was a pretty popular thing for a while.
Yeah.
And it put me in control socially in a way that I hadn't been before, and I really liked that.
So even going back to this time, you're bringing people together, you're creating an event, you're hosting, so it seems like it's a part of you. Or I don't want to put words into your mouth either, but is that accurate?
Sure. I think that's fair.
Yeah. So when you decided that college wasn't for you, what's going through your mind? What was your plan?
I just go see the world. I didn't really have a great plan. I just knew that wasn't right.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you know something's right, the best thing to do is just get away from that first before you can start finding your path. I was working in restaurants at the time. And so that was something that I liked, that I could go back to and occupy my mind. But I didn't really have one. I moved to New York. I went to acting school actually in New York City for a couple years to see if that was going to stir something. It was fun, but it wasn't what I was looking for. And again, the whole time I was working in restaurants, and it was like a gravity. It just kind of kept pulling me back.
At this point, did you have any inclination that this might be something the restaurant industry might be something that you do, that might be your path? No. I
mean, I was working I worked at a restaurant in Times Square, which was like a total zoo.
Yeah.
So I got lots of experience, and I liked my job. I liked my work, but the restaurant managers that I worked with were like some of the most unhappy people I'd ever met in my whole life. So, if the pathway to leadership in restaurants was to have to be that person, I wanted nothing to do with that.
That didn't discourage you going forward?
I think I had some second thoughts once I started making real serious decisions about moving forward. I didn't consider it when I first moved to New York. It was not something that I was seriously thinking about.
Okay. So I see that it was in 2007 that you went to go work with Frames Bowling Lounge. I'm assuming that this was I have a lot to learn. This is after you decided to your failure. I don't want to call it a failure, but your first.
The bar?
Yeah, the bar.
Actually,
it
was a great success. But it was a great success, but my business partners were not interested in pursuing that success.
So what led into the Martini Bar? Because, I mean, you left school in 2003. You were 26. I'm assuming this is around 2006, just before 2007.
2003, I was 23.
Okay.
I think it was 2005 or 6 when I went for the bar. But what led into it was I looked at the people that were successful at the time in the restaurant business, and I started to feel a pull. And my boss at one of the bars, I worked at 2 Irish pubs in Hoboken, New Jersey, and my boss asked me, would you like to start doing inventory? I'll pay you $50 a week per store. And I said, okay, sure, I'll do inventory. I'll make a little extra money, and it was interesting to me, and I learned about a lot of product. And then I was doing that well, and so I started taking on more and more responsibilities at the places I was working, and that got me very excited. I saw a real path forward. Rather than being like interested, I was like, whoa, I could do this job. And that's when it kind of, the light went off, I suppose.
What really got you excited? Was it actually doing inventory that excited you? Because you're
what people
rare.
were ordering.
Okay.
What people were, no, I hate inventory.
Okay, I was going to say, that's you're a unique beast.
Somebody's doing it in my restaurant right now.
Right.
I was very interested in what people ordered and why they ordered it. I think my interest in the restaurant business have always had a base in a sociological place. Why did they order that? And, what nights are we selling what? That it talks a lot about human behavior and what people are seeking when they go out, what they buy, particularly in a restaurant. And so that was like the hook. That was a real hook for me.
And you said you also were looking to people who were successful. Who were the people that you were looking to at the time, and how did they inspire you?
I mean, I don't know if this is exactly the same time. It was concurrent, but I mean, Danny Meyer I read Setting the Table when I was, 26 or 27, and he put to words how I felt at the time about the restaurant business, and about hospitality in general, and about people and leadership. And so I really enjoyed reading that book. I've read it a bunch of times. I've made my staff and management read it at the restaurants. So I think he was sort of the pinnacle of what I wanted. My boss at Frames was someone that I thought I could look to, but unfortunately that was not how it turned out.
Okay, so let's get into you opening your first business, the Martini Bar. I mean, if you're not counting the gambling that was going on in college.
Sure,
I guess,
let's not count that. Yeah, we won't count that.
Knowing what you know now, opening a total of how many total restaurants have you opened collectively?
Ever? I think maybe 9 or 10 at this point.
Okay, so that's a lot of experience opening restaurants. Knowing what you know now, reflecting back at that time, what advice? What would you have done differently? What advice would you have given the past version of yourself?
Don't trust anybody. If you want the honest truth, is you have to believe in yourself first. Now you can build relationships with people and learn to work together with them, but that place, which was called The Basement, was my first foray into partnerships and landlords, and I think it was a good place setter for my experience since then, which is that I've been successful, but my success has been marked by some tough relationships.
So what did you learn about these relationships, things that you could have done differently in these relationships? Or, I mean, what is like the lesson to beyond just don't trust?
Sure.
You get burnt? Like, would you have protected yourself some way?
More people care a lot more about money than I do.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that I don't want to have money. I have a family, and it's important to have it, obviously. But I don't put money as the first priority in a restaurant or in any business for that matter. I think it's a priority in so much as that it needs to keep the business open and profiting and all that good stuff. But The sort of blind pursuit of making as much as you possibly can, which I've known a lot of people that fit that profile, I find kind of crass and unpleasant, and typically those people are unhappy from what I've seen. Whereas the people that are really inspired and excited about the work that they do, whether they make money or they don't, are the ones that I've found myself spending the most time with.
So knowing what you know about partnerships now, would there have been any exercises you would have gone through, any documents you would have brought into the situation to have protected yourself?
I would have done more background checks.
Okay. Anything else that you would have done differently or you learned from that experience?
No, I mean, I learned from the experience. I mean, you could fill a book, but done differently, I don't know. I mean, I would love to say that I could have anticipated a lot of this stuff that we've gone through, that I've gone through personally, but I don't know that that's true. I think part of learning how to be in business is learning what people's priorities are, and the only way you're going to really learn what someone's priority is when you push them, when you're in tough situations. And it's easy to every friends when you're doing well.
So like, do you have as much skin in the game as I do? Is that what you mean by what your priorities are? Are you going to match my effort?
Priorities in terms of what they're seeking versus what I'm seeking.
Okay. Vision.
Yeah.
Values.
Yeah. What are we trying to get out of this?
Do we align?
Mm-hmm.
I love it. You said you didn't know what you were doing, quote unquote.
Yeah.
As far as operations go, things that you were doing then that you do differently now, like what were the biggest things that you do now that you didn't do then?
I mean, probably everything. This was when I was 26 and I'm 41. I didn't know a whole lot, and so ordering systems and scheduling and labor budgets and how to promote the business and actually Facebook wasn't really a thing then, but use social media to advance your brand, and brand management I think is a big part of it. I didn't know any of those things. I literally, there was an article that got posted just discussing our bar opening at the basement, and when my way of promoting was to constantly write comments on the article's comment section to try to promote the bar. So I just kept commenting on this post for like months after it had gone up. Nobody was reading anymore, but I was like, well, someone could look at this, and so that's good promotion.
So 6 months into your first ownership, the Martini Bar, what was it called? The Basement?
Mm-hmm.
You decide did the business continue to go, or did you leave, or did the business close?
The two, we'll call them senior partners, decided that they did not want to continue with the Basement. They wanted to open a restaurant there. We'd sort of proven the viability of the location by my partner, whose name was Wayne, although he went by Bubba. And I really successfully launched the space, brought a lot of positive attention to it. And I think the two principal owners of the space, they saw that the space could be successful, and so they ended up opening a restaurant there.
So the business was successful. You proven the location. What was it that made you like? Was it just they wanted something different? There was a mismatch of alignment?
Yeah. In my opinion, I think they got greedy, and they either wanted us to give them a big payday to walk, or they wanted us out so that they could do something there.
Okay, gotcha.
In fact, I know that's what happened.
So you kind of get burnt in this relationship, this scenario. You're still, I mean, was there, at this point, are you like, this is exactly what I would do? I'm on the right path. This is what I want to make my life. What was it exactly that made you fall in love with what you were doing?
You could see relatively, okay, so this is a little bit of a longer answer. Part of my objection to education and why I struggled in college was that, and in high school for that matter, was that I had a hard time finding a tangible result from the application of the new knowledge I had. It was all theoretical. And some of the things you learn in college, I had no application for. I took a couple of history classes that were ancient Asian history, and I was like just totally lost. Whereas in the restaurant business or in the bar business, somebody comes in, they say, okay, if you carry a bottle of Johnny Walker Blue, I'm going to come in every night and I'm going to have 2 drinks. And so I carry a bottle of Johnny Walker Blue. This person comes in every night, has 2 drinks. And not only that, but this person's got friends, and they bring a couple people in, and they start ordering products. So you have the ability as the operator to really sink or swim based on the decisions that you make, and you can see in real time the results of those decisions either working or not. First of all, it's an adrenaline rush. Secondly, it's very satisfying, very validating, and third, it's a great teacher of things. You learn really quickly a certain range of things that will work, and you learn very quickly also the things that won't work. And I like that.
Yeah.
I like that dynamicism, how dynamic it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's that instant satisfaction, the cookie. Like we get we all work to. I think we all want to be seen. We all want to be valued. We all want to have our ultimate purpose in life. And when we get to see that the end result of our effort, it's that satisfaction, that cookie. And that's one of the things of what you're describing right now is one of the things that really concerns me about the direction we're going in with this industry, because we're going in a direction where you no longer get the end result. You no longer get the cookie. And so many people in this industry, that's why we're here, is for that immediate satisfaction, that approval, that you're happy, and that's what feeds my soul. We're not doing this for the money. We're doing this because we love the reward of doing a job well done, right? And you're going to eliminate that reward. Like, what's going to happen to the mental health of the people in this industry when we're just fucking slaving and not getting the cookie, right? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that when you're able to economically provide an environment where people can make enough to take this career seriously, I think that will be a cookie for them. That's the incentive for them, where they're like, okay, my life has value. This is going in a certain direction. I feel compelled. Because I can make enough and I can do something that I love doing. Yeah,
man, I sure hope that's the case. I really do. That
I think when you make it so people don't have to worry about their income, that it's a steady paycheck and that it's going to be there sort of no matter what.
Yeah,
they can start to focus on learning what they're doing rather than just doing it. They come in, they do their job. I think of like a line cook, for example. They come in, they make, whatever is off their station 100 times a night, 200 times a night, and then they leave. And that's not very compelling, especially when you're coming home and you're broke. But when you come home and you've got a full wallet and you feel like, oh, the rent's covered and I can put some money in the bank, you can start thinking about, like, what am I doing? Am I doing all these reps? When you're an athlete, you go to the gym and you work out. And you bench press and you do all this stuff. It's like, that's not fun for anybody. Nobody likes doing that, but you do that for the purpose of advancing your athletic career, whether that's in high school or college or beyond. Ostensibly that's what the guys on the line or the servers are doing. They're getting reps in an industry that's totally viable for them as a career, but they don't look at it that way because they're not making the money to stay in the career.
Yeah, I'm interested. I really want to pull back the layers on that, but I want to save that till we get to current time to know what your plan for doing that for your team is. But you after 6 months, you leave, your partners push you out, mismatch in alignment and vision and what they wanted that space to be. You realize that you need to know more. You need to learn more before you do this again. You go and you seek out mentorship in Frames Bowling Lounge. Turns out that's not the case. You were there for 2 years though. So take us briefly through what happened in that scenario. And I know that you spent some time with the Butter group too, and I'm assuming that's where you really grew the most. But assumptions can get you in trouble.
I went to work at Frames, and I think I got out of it what I wanted generally. It was a big operation. It was in Midtown Manhattan. We did a lot of revenue. We had a lot of different kinds of revenue. So there was food, there was alcohol, it was a bowling facility. They had a sort of a nightlife component to it. And that was a really interesting job because, if I'm fascinated by people drinking Johnny Walker Blue or what they drink, I mean, this is a whole different ballgame. It was like a 35,000 square foot facility. So I really got the chance to see a big operation up close. The mentorship that you talked about, I thought I was getting the guy I was learning from. I've found out since then really didn't know what he said he knew, which is fine. I mean, you learn the wrong way.
Yeah.
You learn a lot from the wrong way too. And he knew some things, but I think that exposure to a big store that's able to, I mean, I don't know what they're doing now, but that's able to do $10+ million a year, I think opens up a different perspective than most people in the restaurant business. Most people are not doing that kind of revenue ever from one store.
Yeah.
But that's what I wanted. I wanted a store that could do that.
So what were the biggest lessons you learned, even if it was what not to do?
Be empathetic. Retain your staff as long as you possibly can. And what else? Make money, by that I mean revenue, all day rather than trying to make a ton in a small window of time. Okay. So the days that we were really successful there were the days where we would be booked from 11 a.m. until 11 p.m. or 1 a.m. or whatever it was. Whereas we might have huge days on the weekend, but it's all compressed down into a 2-3 hour window, which is very stressful. It's hard to execute. It's better to do it at a high level all day than do it at extremely high level for a small window.
So what were you doing, or what were they doing to maintain that high level of operation or I guess volume all day? Was it events? Was it?
Yeah, we had tons of events. We were in a highly trafficked area of Midtown. Yeah. It was also like the most disgusting building in Midtown, but we were constantly surrounded by people, and so there was a natural flow of people. We also had a sales department. I think there was like 4 people in it. That drove traffic, and then we also developed. Actually, I did some social leagues, which are now very common, but at the time really didn't exist a whole lot, and that drove traffic as well.
Yeah, so getting creative and realizing that you're in the business of experience and events, not just food production, but creating those experiences. You said retaining staff. Was there a story tied to this?
No, I mean, it was a huge staff. I mean, it was a big place and it was a big staff, and so your staff is a commodity, and if you are constantly turning it over, it's a cost for you. Whereas if you're able to retain it, not only is it saving you money, but you're also sort of from a high level standpoint, you're putting out better product consistently to your guests. Or even if you're not putting out better product, you're putting it out more efficiently because people are fast. They know how to do the job. You don't need to constantly train them on where to go or what to do. It just made my job easier and less stressful, and allowed me to spend time on learning more of the business.
So what were you doing to retain staff? What did you start doing differently to make sure you were retaining staff?
I developed it was a tip pool system. That was, I think, the biggest step. Obviously, we had lots of business, and so they're making money. But I think the tip pool system, and I was a server for a long time, so I mean, I understand that some servers don't like tip pools.
There's a lot of pushback with that sometimes.
But our tip pool system was a little bit different than most. We have this extra wrinkle, which is called the bonus. And what it means is that you tip share up to 15% of your tips. And that gets tipped out to your bar back and your food run, whatever. But then beyond 15%, you keep. The server keeps. And this is a system that I wished, when I waited tables, it would make me crazy. I'd work at tip shares, and at the time, I would drop 22-23%, which was like a very high tip percentage, especially for Times Square. And, but I would walk with 15% or 16% of my sales, and that was very frustrating for me. So the bonus, the system that we developed, or that I developed, was that you would you drop 15% into the pool, and then you would keep whatever was left for yourself. And so it kind of got the best of both worlds, where the insurance and the financial stability that a tip share provides to the staff, which helps with turnover, was there. But also you weren't de-incentivized as a lead server, as a top server from working there, because you could still make lots of money for yourself.
So if a server made $100, I mean, that's probably a low number, but an easy number to work with. They would take $15, put it into the pool, and keep 70.
No, if the server, so if the server did, let's say, $1,000 in sales, and they received $200 in tips, $150 of that they would share in the tip share, and obviously they're getting a lot of that back too. But the other $50, the 5% difference between 15 and 20%, they would just. They declared it. I mean, we accounted for it for the government, but they pocketed that.
Got it. So ultimately, what made you want to leave this location?
I got offered. Well, my wife was pregnant, And there's lots of reasons, but my wife was pregnant, and we were living in Jersey City, New Jersey at the time, and I just didn't want to be in New York anymore with a kid. I thought that was going to be too much. And so my family lived in Charlotte, and I had a lot of friends there. And ironically, the Butter Group was opening a butter in Charlotte, North Carolina, which I thought was incredible and retrospectively a little crazy. And so I went and interviewed for the job and got the job.
What was the job you were interviewing for?
The general manager of butter.
Got it. Was this a different experience? Were they doing things differently that you've never seen before? Did you grow here?
Yeah, it was a night. I mean, it was a nightclub, but not only was it a nightclub, it was a celebrity-driven, promotions-driven nightclub. So it's the place that you read about maybe on page 6 in the New York Post in New York, or you read about in the gossip columns or Us Weekly. So-and-so was seen at XY Club. Well, the group that I worked for had a club called still does, One Oak, which was enormously successful, still is. They've got locations now in Vegas and, Tokyo, and I think they're about to open Shanghai. They're a huge group, and I got in early with them. It was like their third store, and it was Butter NC, and so I was the whole thing was a completely foreign business model to me. I was in the restaurant business. I didn't know the first thing about nightclubs and bottle service and all that stuff.
So did you find your mentor here?
No.
Okay. Well, you spent 3 years here.
Yeah.
So
it was 2 years there.
2000. I saw 2009 to 2012, just before opening Five Church in Charlotte. So what was going on here that led to your success with Five Church?
On the operations side, I learned what brand management was and how important that is. I'd never really known that before. I knew it was a thing. I didn't know how important it was. On the expansion side, like what I was going to do next, I met Alejandro Torrio, who's my business partner, and he's a director of promotions for the Fifth Street Group, but he was a director of promotions for Butter NC, and he was sort of my what do you want to call that? He was my marketing version of me, or promotional version of me, where he, in my opinion, was an expert on his field, and it was a field that I knew almost nothing about, and it was very exciting to meet someone who so profoundly understood an area that I wanted to learn desperately. Yeah. So that was what really launched it.
So if his lane at this point is marketing promotion, what's your lane? Operations?
Operations.
Okay. What you said, brand management. You learned a lot about brand management. What is brand management in your words?
It's understanding that how people think of your company is when they're not in the restaurant. How people perceive what you all do and where you sort of stack up within either in your field or in your subfield. I'm in the restaurant business, but I'm in the full service restaurant business, but I'm in the upmarket full service business. So each one of those has its own sort of like category and ranking. And so understanding sort of where you fall and why you fall there and what you can do to control that is brand management.
Okay. So like a lot of the psychographics, right? So are there any key lessons specifically that you could pay forward to the people listening to this around brand management to influence brand management?
That every decision matters. Everything that you say publicly has an impact on the brand, but more importantly is the best way to change people's perception of your brand is to put out a great product.
Yeah.
You can hire promotional PR companies, and you can hire marketing teams and all that, but at the end of the day, the best way to manage your brand is to know what kind of product you want to put out and then put that product out and make people happy.
How do you maintain that standard of what you're trying to do?
You raise hell.
What do you mean by that?
There's something that you're going to ask me later, I think, but I'll tell you now is I don't let bullshit answers go unrebutted ever in any capacity. And I think that has been a deciding factor in our company is that not only can I not deal with BS answers, but it makes me feel sick and angry and crazed when people are not they're not doing their job as described, and then they lie about it or they BS or whatever. It makes me feel insane because it disrupts your sense of trust, and your sense of trust is what allows you to do more than one thing at a time because you can delegate. And so I think that's...
So having those standards and not budging
Mm-hmm.
and really holding people accountable to meeting the standard.
Yeah, I mean, I think making sure that people understand that there's going to be good days, there's going to be bad days. And we understand both, that you're going to make mistakes and you're going to have successes. But it's the times when you are not straight about what you're doing or hoping that you will only have successes. No one only has successes. And it's very, very frustrating to manage somebody or to work with somebody who is unable to take responsibility for their failures or their mistakes or whatever.
What if they do fail, but they're like, I totally fucked up?
It's awesome. I mean, I fucked up are the three most important words in the restaurant business.
Yeah.
I might argue they're the three most important words in life.
Why?
Because we all do. You know, we all make mistakes. We make mistakes daily. And the capacity to be able to learn from those mistakes and move on, I believe, starts with acknowledging the mistakes, taking responsibility for them, owning them, and then trying to figure out why the mistake was made and what needs to be done to make sure it doesn't happen again.
So regarding maintaining that brand image, how do you communicate the standards to make sure they're being held?
That's a very big question.
Yeah.
A lot of it is empowerment. A lot of it is going to your team, no matter what position they are. You know, you're a GM, you're a server, you're a line cook, you're a dishwasher, doesn't matter. And empowering them to be able to do their job in a way that makes them feel proud of what they do. I don't care what they do. And most of the time, what we've seen is the best way to do that is to show a path that they could walk down if they continue to do what they're doing, to give them a sense of scale and perspective that, like I said before, it's hard to have when you're like, you know, elbow deep in a pot, you know, washing, you know, junk off of a pot or pan, or, you know, when you're getting, you know, reamed out by a unruly customer or a rude customer. I think it's hard to have that perspective. And so a lot of what we do, and I'm going to say we because I think the company does this, but I feel like it starts with me, is
there's only we.
Totally. I mean, I firmly believe that, but I think it starts with us saying, okay, why are you doing this? Okay, then here's the path, or here's another path, or here's another path. You have options. You don't have to feel trapped. You don't have to feel frustrated.
Yeah.
Outside of the sort of visceral frustration of having to wash a pan or having to deal with an unruly customer, the long game, it doesn't have to look so bleak with us.
Yeah. And I'm constantly echoing Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And right above being seen and recognized is personal growth. I mean, it's not enough to give people purpose within your organization, but they need to know there's something beyond that. Right. And I did an amazing workshop with Nick Cirillo from Nick's Pizza, based just outside of Chicago. And he taught us how to build that, he calls it tangible framing within your business. So people get hired and they say, here are the paths and here's how you here's exactly what you need to do to get to this point. Here's exactly what you need to do to get to this point. So people from day one know there's opportunity. Are you doing similar things?
Yes. I mean, I was just discussing this actually this morning with a couple people that work for me, that our general manager at Five Church Charlotte started with us as an intern. And our executive chef, or actually our chef partner at this restaurant and several other, Adam Hodgson, started this as a line cook.
It's all about creating opportunity.
And so as long as there's a path, I think people see it and it feels accessible. Doesn't mean everybody's going to walk it. Doesn't mean everybody wants it. But as long as it's there, it's a form of sort of stress relief from my perspective, that it's like, okay, if I keep doing this and I do it the right way, I'm going to get noticed. And I'm going to be given opportunity, and that opportunity is something that's real. It's not just strung out. You know, it's not some, you know, BS just to keep me doing, you know, what I'm doing. It's real, and I can believe in it. And so we've been exceedingly successful, I think, at doing that and building that company culture.
Now it's time to talk about how you broke off to do your own thing. So just get into that whole story of how Five Church started.
Alejandro texted me and he said that a space in Uptown Charlotte that had been a Scottish pub had closed and was available. And we had been looking, Alejandro and our other partner, Mills Howell, and I had been looking, and we had found Jamie, Chef Jamie Lynch by that point, and we were really ready.
Is he up in Boston now?
No, he was in Charlotte at that point.
Okay.
Oh, is he in Boston this moment?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know where
Bar
he is.
Matsana? I don't know. I feel like that name is really familiar.
It's
Sorry,
quite possible.
Yeah.
We don't wear the magnetic ankle bracelets anymore, so we never know where we are. But we were ready to open something. We were really ready. You know, we were still working at Butter at the time. Jamie was working at a restaurant called Barrington's in Myers Park in Charlotte. And Alejandro saw the space. We got in touch with our broker, who's still our broker actually, and did the deal. The location that we found, which was on the corner of 5th and Church Street, that's the name, was by all standards of measure a jinxed location. I'm sure everyone in the restaurant business could quickly think of a location in their neighborhood that's a quote-unquote jinxed location. I don't believe in jinxed locations. I think that's a bunch of nonsense. I think everything happens for a reason. And in this case, our location was quote-unquote jinxed because the landlord didn't do a great job of vetting his potential tenants.
Yeah, what percentage of restaurants fail?
It's a pretty
So
pretty hardy percentage.
The likelihood of 3 or 4 locations failing consecutively, the odds are good.
Well, this was like, I think in 10 years he had 7 tenants, and then there was 2 years where it was empty. It was really a dumping ground for bad ideas. But I think we were the beneficiaries of that because his threshold for allowing people to take the space was pretty low, and he was pretty desperate.
Was he lowering the bar as far as rent and stuff to make sure?
I mean, the rent's dirt cheap.
Okay.
The rent now is dirt cheap. It's laughably cheap. Our power bill at 5 Church Charleston was higher than our first year rent. And so you make when you're young and you're an entrepreneur, you try to make the best of a bad situation. And the bad situation was the location was undesirable. And so we went in and did a full cosmetic upfit. We saved a bunch of money because the kitchen was already in place. There was some equipment in place. We got the place open for, I think, $550,000, which, again, is laughable by comparison to what we have to spend now. And Alejandro was in charge of marketing promotions. Chef Jamie was in charge of the food. I was in charge of the operations. We all knew lots of people in Charlotte. People were excited for us. And the space was really cool and fun and different, and we just took off. I mean, almost, I'm not going to say instantaneously, but within 6 months, it was clear we were a real big hit.
Yeah.
And people didn't know quite what to make of us.
Now, one of the issues you had with your first restaurant, the Martini Bar, was that you didn't have alignment with your partners.
Mm-hmm.
Explain the difference between the dynamic between those partners and this dynamic and why it worked.
I'm going to blame myself for the basement not having a, because I didn't know who my partners were. I didn't know anything. Whereas by the time 5 Church came around, which was several years later, and working for a lot of different people, I knew what I wanted in a partner. I knew where at least some of my weaknesses were as an operator, and I knew the kind of personality of the person that I wanted to work with or people that I wanted to work with. And I wanted to have final say-so. I think that was a really important thing for me. I wanted to have the ability to have control over what we were doing, because
autonomy, it's huge.
I mean, having agency. If I was going to give one piece of advice to somebody in my position, is make sure you have agency. Make sure you have the ability to say.
What do you mean by agency?
You have control. You have your own ability to control the outcome of what happens. So when everyone bets on you, you're not relying on a manager or a chef or another partner. It's entirely based on your performance, and obviously a little bit of luck and a little bit of fate and all that good stuff.
Okay, so you said you knew your weaknesses now. You knew your weaknesses now, and you knew what you were looking for. What were your weaknesses, and what were you looking for?
I didn't know how to reach out to people beyond the brick and mortar of the building. So in other words, once the guests got into the restaurant, I felt very comfortable. I knew we'd be able to serve good food. I knew we'd have good service. I knew how to make lots of drinks. I knew about wine kind of. But I didn't know how to move people. And that's really what a promoter's job is, a marketing person's job is to motivate people to break their habit. Okay, it's Tuesday. I'm going to go eat at Joe's Bar and Grill, and I'm going to get my Caesar salad. I'm going to get a cheeseburger. I'm going to go to bed. And what you have to do as a new business is you have to give them a reason to break that habit. and to come try you out. And then when they try you out, obviously you need to impress them. I didn't have that skill set, and so, or at least not the way that I wanted to be able to be busy and successful fairly quickly. Whereas Alejandro had that in spades. Further, I also didn't know how to put out great food. I knew how to put out good food, but Jamie was able to make great food. And so those two things, I think if it had just been me, I think we would have been successful. But I think that Jamie and Alejandro were the game changers in so much as that they both were excellent at their respective areas. And so we were able to go further and faster because of it.
Okay. So also the power of three. Mm-hmm. Get into that. Do you know where I'm going with that?
No.
So partnerships.
I mean, like the Holy Trinity and whatnot?
In partnerships, they say always try to have an odd number, and there seems to be, I think three. Usually, somebody to represent the back of house, somebody to represent the front of house, operations person, and then that third person that brings something, whether it be back of house, whether it's accounting and finance or a lawyer. Whenever there's that third person that covers something that's crucial to the success of a business, whether it be all those like details or marketing promotion. But then on top of that, to have three partners that, I mean, there's never going to be a tie. You know what I'm saying? There's always going to be a swing vote. Yeah. Right. So has that served you?
No. It's a good lead in. But no, I mean, we've had lots of partners.
Yeah.
And we have had different sort of configurations of how decision-making apparatus our decision-making apparatus is applied. I think that there are times where I will completely defer to Alejandro or Jamie to make a decision, and vice versa. But I don't think that there's a magic number. I think it's about finding the right people. Mm-hmm. If you can find 10 of the right people, great. As long as it's clear how a decision is made. I think that's really where people get stuck, and that's why 3 is such a convenient number because there's a tiebreaker. I'd rather have 50 than 2 others. I'd rather have 100 talented people that are going to give me great information and great advice and have expertise on a whole variety of areas. And that's sort of what our company is now. Yeah. That's my preference. The more people that are like-minded in terms of how they work, but diverse in terms of what they work on in their knowledge set is great for business.
Diversifying skill set, so you're well-rounded. Mm-hmm. I love that. I mean, the other thing I think that you mentioned that is key too is that you opened a restaurant where you have roots, where you have a network, where people know you. How was that significant?
That was, I mean, I think that had a lot to do with our early success. Is that we had friends that were ready to support us. We had friends that were ready to talk about us. And that's not just our personal friends, but people in the business that knew us and were excited for us to get a chance.
Were these friends influencers, people that were well connected?
Everything. Yeah.
So getting to example of the type of friends you want to make that served you.
I think most of the people that knew me before we opened respected that I knew what I was doing. Certainly the vendors and other chefs in Charlotte respected what Jamie was doing. And I think because of that, now people didn't really know Alejandro in the restaurant world at that point. Most restaurants don't have a promoter.
Yeah, they're usually behind the scenes.
Yeah. So, but I mean, from a credibility standpoint, I think both Jamie and I brought enough to the table to get people excited. Yeah. They're like, oh, okay, we've heard of these guys, and they were running this place or that place, and I've heard of that too, and that's the brand association I was talking. Okay, I get it and I dig it, and they look at a couple pictures. Okay, I'm into this. That is how I think that the early decisions were made whether or not to come try out our restaurant or not.
Got it. So I mean, you obviously did really great. Within 3 years, 2015, you opened 5 Street Charleston. Did you open any other locations in Charlotte, or was it just?
Yes,
because I don't see those on your.
Yeah, we've deleted those.
Okay, so
we had one. We opened a restaurant in South End called Nan and Byron's.
Okay, what happened there? When did it close?
We sold it. We sold it in 2016.
A year after opening 5th Street or 5 Street.
Yeah, we
opened
opened
5 Church.
We opened 5 Church Charleston in November 2015. We opened 5 Church Atlanta in June of 2016.
Okay, so what were the lessons from this other restaurant?
One is be careful who you pick as a partner. And two is don't underestimate how challenging being in multiple markets can be.
And it's funny because you put the emphasis on the significance of having the right partners, but also the significance of what happens when you choose the wrong partner.
Yes.
And not without, not to, bad talk anybody, but what was wrong with this partnership versus the other ones?
The partner in question was not, in my opinion, or actually this is proven at this point, a very honest person. and was not good at his job, in my opinion. And so as a byproduct of that, it led to a lot of, and we didn't know that initially. We thought it was issues internally in the operation. We thought it was issues with the brand. We didn't know where the source of the problem was coming from until a little further down the line. But once we figured it out, we fixed it very quickly.
Do you select partners differently because of this experience, or are you more
100%?
And what are you doing differently now?
Vetting them.
And what's the best way to vet somebody?
Background checks.
Okay.
And call references.
Got it.
And ask them questions that people in the position they're being hired for can answer and not BS their way through. I mean, the restaurant business, as much as I love it, there is a lot of transients. And so there's a lot of people, especially in management positions, that can sit in an interview and kind of BS their way through it for 30 minutes. But once you see them at work, you're like, oh, you don't, either you don't know what you're talking about, or, you're not working very hard, or you made a lot of false promises. And so I think being able to really dig deep and ask the right questions during an interview is what allows you to get through the BS.
Yeah, and I really want to dive into the scale of Five Church, but I'm curious. I think the first 3 to 5 years in an organization is where a lot of personal growth happens, where a lot of you got to get that first location to a point where it's humming on its own before you can even think to look in other places. So take us through that evolution of that first restaurant, specifically related to like systems, process, culture.
We didn't wait those 3 years. We didn't get it humming first. And I think that's a big part of why we faced as many challenges as we did with Nana Byron's, our second restaurant, was that Five Church opened and within a year had paid back the initial startup. Was in national press. With the DNC came to Charlotte, and we were like the toast of the town. It was a really crazy time, and everyone wanted to have us as a tenant, every landlord. And so when we did Nana Byron's, we did not have sufficient infrastructure in place, and we had not successfully vetted the people that we were going to be putting in charge, namely this one person. And as a result, the concept kind of came out as muddled and people liked it, but didn't work the way that we thought it was going to. And because of that, it was like a constant drain on me, on the ownership group, and on the management across the board. Because, when it's just not, and I know people listening to this would know this feeling, is when your restaurant's not working, it's a very desperate feeling, because you don't know what to do. I mean, you can look at stuff and hope that's going to work, but it takes a long time to prove yourself right or wrong, especially when it's sort of more macro issues. And so it was a very humbling experience.
You said the infrastructure wasn't there.
Infrastructure, yeah.
Get into detail. What is that infrastructure? What's that look like, that framing?
I think first it's having enough people that know the business enough, that have that real depth of knowledge. I think second is that I didn't have the depth of knowledge or the patience that I have now. I think that the restaurant would have been a massive hit if we just left it alone. We got 6 months in. We were frustrated that the top line wasn't better, and so we sort of retooled the brand to try to attract more people, and then that didn't work, and so we retooled the brand again. And that's a lot
Confusion.
To do, where you confuse your customer base. We're like, we don't know what you are.
That's not brand align or brand.
It's not anything.
Yeah.
It's just a big mess. And so I believe firmly that the original business model, which was a traditional American concept, Nan and Byron are the two models for the painting American Gothic. The guy, the farmer with the pitchfork, and the woman.
Oh, yeah.
We wanted something really traditional, classic American, iconic. And we ended up being basically a small version of Five Church in South End, which was not what we wanted. And so I think the lesson learned there the most was patience, because I think if we just left it alone, it would still be there. it would be doing exceptional business, and we would have gone a totally different trajectory.
Yeah. You also mentioned that like you weren't really humming. It took time for you to get to that point, to where you were humming.
Mm-hmm.
When did that happen?
At Five Church?
Yeah.
2000 and once we kicked out the partner that we were having issues with. I think once we eliminated that person, we started to take more control over everything, and it didn't take long.
What do you mean by take control? What did taking control look like?
We were entrusting this person to make a lot of decisions on behalf of the business and shouldn't have.
Okay.
And so everything, menu design, pricing structure. I think the biggest one was just, what do we want out of this? What is the cultural goal from this business? Is it to make every penny that we possibly can, or is it to make a really great living while simultaneously providing a product that can inspire others and we could feel positive about?
Got it. You open your second, well, technically third or technically fourth for you location in Charleston, and I was really intrigued by that decision to get far away from your first restaurant. What was the choice? Why did you choose to do that?
So when I was in college, I had a good friend who was dating this girl at College Charleston, and he actually ended up marrying her, and we would go down frequently to Charleston to visit.
What's the distance to drive that?
It was a long drive.
It was like
from Chapel Hill from Chapel. Yeah, it was probably 5 or 6 hours. But we went down not infrequently. I think we maybe half dozen times. And her friend had a good group of friends, and we had a good group of friends. And I don't know, it was just, it was a time in my life where I didn't have any obligations. And Charleston's a really magical place for me, for lots of people. And I just had a great time. I really liked who I was when I was there, and I liked the people that I was with when I was there. And it kind of stuck with me, it's a fun place. It's a neat place to go. And so it's not far from Charlotte. It's like a 2 hour and 45-minute drive, depending on how urgently you need to get there.
Okay.
And how bad the traffic is, I guess. So we view Charleston as a place we always wanted to go. And then Five Church, you can't open more than one Five Church in a marketplace. It's too idiosyncratic. It's too specialized. And so,
do you have to find the corner of 5 and Church everywhere you go?
No, we just gave up on that. Actually, we're on the corner of 4th and Church here, but we didn't call it 4 Church. But we wanted to stretch our bandwidth, but not so much that we couldn't handle it. And so Charleston was a very desirable place for us. Also, Charleston's got an amazing culinary scene. And so I think we wanted to be considered amongst the best. It's a strange phenomenon. Sorry, I'm going to go off track here for a second. It's a strange phenomenon there is of like saying things like that. Like, we wanted to be the best, and there's always somebody out there who's like, "Hey, fuck you. Why do you think you're so special?" And why, and it's gotten to the point now where there's this like sea of false modesty amongst successful business people, especially people in the restaurant business.
Sea of false modesty.
It's real
amongst.
Yeah, I'm so thankful and I'm so grateful.
Because they're going through.
My life's so amazing. Yeah. And it's just like, fuck you.
You're
just spare me.
Absolutely.
Spare me your false modesty. You're successful.
It's an issue.
Take pride in your success. There's nothing wrong with that.
It's an issue, but I think that we project false, like you're saying, modesty,
totally.
Also false stability.
Yeah.
And there's all these brands out there getting James Beard awards left and right. And they're doing amazing things. The service is amazing. The food's amazing. Everything's amazing. But a lot of these companies, to be that amazing, aren't profitable.
Right.
But we also celebrate this in the industry. They're getting accolades and awards.
Right.
And everybody's going, that's what we need to do.
Right.
But what they're like, and I talk to these people, I know they're not profitable, a lot of them, right? It's just like, why are we rinse repeating this? Like, what's going on? I think a lot of that is because of we don't control the dialogue.
Right.
Media companies control the dialogue. And I know I'm a media company, but I don't see myself as one because I'm really a student first. But like they just, I guess, what's the word? Celebrate these people who are literally pulling their hair out and scraping to get by.
Right.
I mean, is that kind of a stretch from what the point?
No, I think it's. So here's the balancing act, right? You don't want to come off as like some egomaniacal jerk.
Yeah.
Right. I'm the greatest restaurateur ever and blah blah. You don't want to come off that way. But I don't think there's anything wrong with acknowledging your success, and moreover, trying to teach and share. That's sort of what you're doing here. Share with others how you became successful. But it starts with you saying that I am very successful. And it's funny. This is a good test for you down the road. Is like every restaurateur that you go to, I would love to hear if they'd be willing to say I'm very successful. Just say those words. I think we've been trained so proactively to not. Oh, the fates align, the stars align, and all this. And it's like, I'm here because I worked my fucking ass off. I found really great people who also worked their asses off and who cared. We've had some good luck. We've had some really terrible luck too. But that's why we are where we are, and I have no reservations about owning our success. I don't think I'm the greatest restaurateur ever. I don't think we're the greatest restaurant group ever. I think we're pretty great. Yeah. Starting there is what allows you to grow, because we're being honest about who we are. If I came in, I was like, I'm so lucky and everything's just falling into place for me. That's not true. Yeah. And I can't be straight with the people that I'm trying to teach if that's the position I take.
And I think it's also important to compound on what you're saying, is that success and greatness is relative to the beholder. Sure. Whatever that group or that person is trying to become. And I think that when the media controls the dialogue and says this is success, then it kind of, everyone is like, well, if I'm not that, then I'm not successful. But the truth is, what the hell do you want? What's important to you? What are your values? What do you need to be happy? That's success. Yeah. And I think that needs to be communicated, because we're just really just, it's kind of twisted what's happening in our industry.
Well, I mean, when this is a great conversation.
Thank you. When I'm loving it too.
When you go on Yelp and TripAdvisor and OpenTable and all these different review sites, you're allowing others to control the dialogue. I think the overall metric is like 3% of your total customer base actually goes online and writes a review. You have food writers in the newspaper where you've got one or two people. You've got Eater where you've got a couple people. There's such a narrow field of people that are contributing to the sort of noise that exists out there about a business. Yeah. And I'm saying it from a media standpoint, from a I can go on Google and search standpoint. That's absurd. Yeah. That's not how this works. There are 350 people in my company, of which my guests interact with one or two. To make an assumption about the entirety of an experience or the kind of brand you are based on such a limited scope, or by reading something online, I think is a false narrative. It's terribly shallow in terms of its representation. And so, again, I think it starts with people being straight with each other about where they're at. I would not trade positions with any restaurateur in the country. I am extraordinarily happy with my group. I think we're incredibly lucky, but I think we've worked incredibly hard, and we've capitalized on that good fortune. Start there. We'll start there and let every restaurateur do that. And I think you're going to have a lot more honest dialogues out there.
I'm really enjoying this rabbit hole we went into, but I want to bring it back to the timeline. Sure. I think there's a ton of value there. Thank you. So one thing, and I think we can reference Danny Meyer, your I want to call him your digital mentor, but your book mentor, right? He references the significance of opening lots of locations within walking distance from each other, because early on you need to have that presence.
Right.
Did opening a restaurant 2.5 hours away, was that a challenge?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
What were the challenges associated with that?
I mean, I think the biggest challenge was not the distance, but rather the personality of the city itself. For those that don't know Charleston, Charleston's an amazing town, but it's very, very protective of its novelty, of its unique nature. And so, I mean, corporate restaurants don't go to Charleston. Ruth Chris opened on Market Street and got completely laughed out of town. They were there for like 3 years, went broke, left, or something. I don't know the whole story. But, it's just not a city where you see big brand names that you see elsewhere. There's not a Cheesecake Factory downtown in Charleston. There's virtually no fast food downtown, or at least not towards the southern tip of the peninsula. It's a really, really specific marketplace. And so when we came rolling to town, tooting our horn, we're the Five Church guys, we're from Charlotte, they were like, fuck you. Who are you guys? And there was some real pushback when we first opened. We opened on Market Street, which is a very touristy area. And in spite of the fact that the store was beautiful and I think we were selling great food, we got some real resistance from the community. Not much more so than we anticipated, and it took a really long time to convince people that we were serious.
When you say the community, are you talking more the
locals,
the consumer, or the community of other restaurateurs?
Well, the consumers, when they're tourists, the consumers are driven by the hospitality community in a certain place. So your concierge or your maitre d' or your server at one restaurant tells you to go to another one, or a bartender. Yeah. I think within the hospitality community, we were not supported. I think part of that was my fault for basically saying, I don't give a shit if the city supports us or not. We did something special here and they're going to have to like us. And that was definitely not the case.
Was your mentality us versus you?
Yeah. A little bit.
Do you stand by that mentality today?
Yes.
Okay.
Totally. I don't think that we're not a corporate group. I mean, I live in Charleston. I moved there to run this restaurant. I love Charleston. And moreover, my story, like we said earlier, goes back to when I was in college and how much I liked it there. So I wasn't an outsider the way that they were trying to paint us. In fact, the food critic talked about NASCAR and Charlotte and really made a point that we were this, semi-small corporate group. And, that was a very surface level and I think unfair categorization for us. So it took a while to make it clear to both the hospitality community and also the residents of Charleston as a whole that we were serious about doing something special there, and that we were willing to wait for them to come find us.
Got it. So, I mean, there's so many different directions we could go in right now. We're going back. We're 5 years out or 6 years out at this point. It was 2015 that you guys opened in Charleston. Sophia's Lounge was 2017. Tempest. Charleston is 2020, and then you have LaBelle's. I'm not sure if I'm saying this correctly. Helene.
Thank
you very much. Yeah. Which is 2021, your most recent restaurant. I mean,
the one we're sitting in right now is.
Sorry, right, correct. Sorry,
Church and you.
Thank you. So take us through the growing pains.
Sure.
Right. So we talked a lot about what it's like to be a single to 2 unit operator, but also you're scaling across now 3 cities, which makes it even more challenging. Like, what are the challenges that you've been faced with over the past since 2012, almost 10 years, specifically around scaling and growing the people around you?
I think it's looking at a person that's a server today and seeing what they're going to be 5 years from now, and trying to help guide them to that result, if that's what they want. Something that I really resented when I was bartending or I was serving, or even when I was a manager before I had been successful, was that, people are selfish and they don't think about others a whole lot. And that's in business too. And so they look at you and they say, oh, you're a bartender. That means you're a bartender today. You were a bartender yesterday. You'll be a bartender forever, because that's all you are to me. And I think bosses do that too. What I learned was, if you want to have a great team, then the best bet is to develop people from the early stages. If they're a hostess, you develop them into a maitre d' and maybe more. If they're a server, you develop them into a bartender or a bar manager, and so on. And so what's happened is, I think post-COVID, it was happening during COVID, but especially post-COVID, a lot of those people that I had started working on, 4 or 5 years ago, really started to mature into successful managers. Successful leaders is probably a better way of putting it. And so as a result, my ability to do more, to delegate and to sort of be in 10 places at once became a lot more real, because they were able to affect change when it was needed and be able to manage without me being there.
Okay. So what was the process of building, like, I guess one way I like to look at this is layers, right? Like, you start with opening a restaurant. A lot of times you're the person in the business doing all this stuff. Then you build people around you, put a layer.
It's like shark teeth.
Yeah. So like how many layers are you at, I guess, from going, I don't know, where we are today? Like, what layers are between you and the work? How have you framed the business? How have you built the business?
There's about 4 at this point. There's me, and then there's a round of let's say partners and executives in the company. Executive sounds a little much. That's not an accurate description. But and then there's the store managers themselves, and there's the service managers or chefs or whatever that are actually the ones that are like on the floor every day dealing with people. So there's about 4 rows of people.
So when you're building and you're expanding, you got to build. I like to say like 2 things determine growth, right? And feel free to disagree with me. I don't have all the answers. People and cash flow. So it's when people start bursting at the seams at one location, and you say, I don't have any room for growth for you. We need to open another location to give you opportunity. What do you want to do? Like, what's your plan? And then you just create opportunities for people, and that's what kind of determines growth. I guess where I'm going with this is, how are you looking? Do you agree with that statement? Is that what your approach is?
Totally.
So what's that process of selecting, and how are you retaining? Are you offering equity in the business to these partners? Like, what's that? How do you find these people? How do you attract these people? How do you do that right?
It starts with do I want to be partners with this person or not? And it doesn't matter if do I want to be partners with them 5 years from now because they're a server today, or do I want to be partners with them right now? If I believe that there's somebody that ultimately I could be partners with, then my job, as far as I'm concerned, is to be supportive and to train them and to allocate resources to whoever that person is to allow them to continue to grow, especially if they know what they want. I think a challenge for a lot of people in the restaurant business, especially when they're in it early, is they don't know what they want yet. There's a lot of young people. Like I said, there's a lot of transients. And so if you're 24, 25 years old and let's say you're behind the bar of a place like Five Church, you don't know what you want necessarily. You might be open to a career in the hospitality business. You might be, in school for real estate. You might be whatever. And so filtering through a lot of that sort of statistical noise to find the people that want what they're doing, that are good at what they're doing, and that you want to be partners with long term is the first step. That's how you sort of find them. And then you make promises to them and you deliver on them.
So finding them, are you looking for them outside of your organization, or are you probing within your organization?
Yeah.
So what's that process of probing and discovering what people want look like? How do you do that?
I think watching them work is a great way to start. The nice thing about the restaurant business is it's not like I have to ask you, hey, fill out this report, and I read it and I analyze your performance. This is like I get to walk in, and whether they're a busboy or even the general manager, you're able to see them perform in real time. And it's like poker. I mean, if you're good at it, you can read what people have without seeing their cards. I think I've always been pretty good at identifying talent in people, how they carry themselves, how they move around the room, how they make eye contact, and that's the start. So it's sort of like that's like the first filter. Actually, the first filter is whether or not they're willing to take the initiative to say that they want something more, and then after that is like finding people and filtering, and then each round of growth for them comes with sort of a cliff or a threshold where they get pushed to the limit of what they want. Do you really want to be a manager?
Yeah. Do
Do you really want to be a general manager?
Yeah.
Do you really want to be a partner? And sort of each step comes with its own incentives and its own sort of liabilities, and seeing how they deal with that is what kind of gives away to me what I want from them.
So when you get to that partner level, that partner layer, how do you find the balance between what's your vision for what you want and what's our vision for what we want?
By the time they're ready to be partners with us, I think we all have a similar vision. It requires a buy-in as an employee and as a leader in our company, so that by the time they're ready to be partners with us, it's a no-brainer for me. In fact, oh my God, I think we have 7, 8, 9. I think we have like 7 or 8 employees that started as employees that are now equitable partners with us.
And I mean, as far as like a vision or concept, are you saying pitch your vision to me, or are you pitching visions to them?
Both.
Okay.
Both. In fact, actually, my VP of operations and my director of culinary something, or I don't know what his title is, but Adam Hodgins and Madison White were given the assignment of drafting a business model with some of the other smaller scale equity partners that we have, and said, pitch me a business model, and I can put together the funding and support it if it's a good business model. Get passionate about it. It doesn't have to just be like, the Fifth Street Group, like, Jamie L. Hunter and myself's vision. It can be their vision too, provided that they are able to prove that it's a viable business. So, and then vice versa is, I want to open a church and union in Denver, which is what we're working on right now. Will you guys come out here and give me feedback and tell me what you think and, give me 10 negatives and 10 positives and all that good stuff. And so it kind of goes both ways because each direction the information goes is a meeting of the minds. It's an ability for people to find common ground and find the things that we agree on, or to vet out areas where we don't agree and start to try to deal with that in advance of something seriously being wrong down the road.
Yeah. So I am curious because you mentioned earlier that what a big part of your original success was the fact that you had the roots. Now you're talking about going to Denver, right? Do you have roots there, or are you investing in people? So what's the new challenge of, like, for example, your newest location where we're sitting today in Nashville? I've heard that Nashville is very receptive of new people coming in, whereas Charleston was like, fuck you. Was that the same when you came to Nashville?
No one has said "fuck you" to me yet.
Okay, good. It's
no,
good to know.
I mean maybe they have. I haven't heard them say it.
Is that true about the culture of Nashville?
I think Nashville's excited for its growth. Yeah. Nashville is like, the gates are open. They want people to come here, and to put roots down and to spend money here. Whereas, and that's probably to do with just the real estate. I mean, Nashville's a big sprawling city. There's lots of neighborhoods that surround the downtown area. And so there's space to grow. Whereas Charleston, I mean, it's a very, very small, I mean, there's like 3 streets in Charleston. It's like King Street, Meeting Street, Market, and East Bay, that's 4. But it's a small city with not a lot of available commercial real estate. And so there's just not as much inventory, and so people are more protective of what goes in here. Whereas here, there's lots of inventory. And so if they find out that, they're getting a Yard House, let's use Yard House as an example, which I don't think much of as a brand, but they do exceedingly well. Lots of people will be over the moon that a Yard House is coming to Nashville because there is available space and because they're not taking someone else's place, but rather just developing a new neighborhood or whatever. It's when restaurants start taking spaces of places that people really liked where you get resentment.
Yeah, but I think what's interesting about Nashville is that it's filled with transplants. So I would argue probably at least half, if not the majority of people that are in Nashville are probably not from Nashville. So there's probably not as much of what's the word I'm looking for? History, or I guess
cultural identity.
Yeah, so like, I mean, do you disagree or agree with that?
Yeah, that's probably right. I mean, Nashville reminds me a lot of Charlotte.
Yeah.
With music.
I mean, you could say the same thing about Denver. There's a lot of influence there.
Yeah.
Too.
Most cities are like that.
Nostalgia is the word I was looking for.
Most cities are like that.
To like brands.
I would compare Charleston to a place like Asheville, North Carolina, where it has a really clear cultural identity for the city and for the downtown area, et cetera. And so, and it's not very flexible. And so when you go down there and you say, hey, we're here and we're going to do this new thing and you're going to like it whether you like it or not, I think there's obviously some reluctance to get on board that. Whereas a huge city where you get offerings of all kinds, they're like, whatever, we'll take whatever you're willing to bring us.
Yeah. So one thing that I really want to start talking more about on the show, and I'm really going to try to be much more intentional about this, is talking, the future, or the mission statement of Restaurant Unstoppable is to inspire, empower, and transform the industry. And I've been thinking a lot about that transformation element of the mission statement. And what does transformation look like? What needs to change in our industry? And how can we share knowledge and perspective to make that change happen? Because I think now is a really important time we're coming back. We're kind of coming out of that window of stillness. But at the same time, I think we really need to be much more intentional with how we go into the future. And you earlier said, and I made a note to come back to this, the new cookie is the economic stability. So if we're marching into the future where this industry, food and beverage, is going to be much more transactional, much more digital, much more you never see the end result of the experience that you created for somebody. Get into more about the cookie being the economic stability and what the future of this industry looks like.
It starts with viewing the restaurant business and hospitality as a whole as being a viable career. I think that's really where we have lost as an industry to a lot of other industries, is that the entry-level pay is terrible. The treatment at a lot of places is terrible. There's virtually no upward mobility. and there's a lot of self-destructive tendencies that are a byproduct of lack of upward mobility in pay, which is alcoholism, drug abuse, etc. And so I talk about this all the time with my staff, where, like, let's say somebody calls out from a shift and they're like, oh, I can't come in today, whatever, and they give some ridiculous excuse. And I say to my managers, if this person was working at Bank of America and they tried to say they couldn't come in because, whatever their excuse was, would Bank of America tolerate that? And of course, the answer is almost always no, they wouldn't tolerate it. I'm like, well, then why are we tolerating this? Now, obviously, we're a restaurant, we're not a bank, and so our our threshold for tolerance is a little different. But I think the point still stands, which is that this is a real career. I mean, I started washing dishes when I was 16 years old, working at South Park Mall at Atlanta Bread Company. Maybe I was 15. I don't know. And it started in a very modest way, and I've done exceedingly well for myself. And most of that's because I've worked really, really hard and had a vision of where I wanted to go in this business. That's hard to do when you're filtered out of the business within the first 5 years that you're in it, because it's miserable and you can't grow.
So what needs to change to create that upward mobility?
Access to equity, access to cash.
So what needs to change for the industry to have access to cash?
Think about it like Moneyball, right? Moneyball, the logic in the book or of that thesis was that the more people that you have on base, the higher your likelihood of scoring runs. Instead of getting people on base, think of it like the longer you keep them in the industry, the higher the likelihood that they'll end up staying in the industry. If you've got a server who comes in and they're a senior year of college and they work for 2-3 years, they really like it, they got a lot of natural skill, they don't know exactly where they're trying to go. If you provide them with an environment where they can see a clear line of success from where they are to where they want to go, they won't leave.
Yeah, and I think it's really important too when you see somebody who does have what it takes, who does have a natural inclination to this industry, you got to let them know. Because sometimes, so many times in this show, when I've asked a question like, when did you know that this was your path? It almost, 90% of the time goes back to somebody told me I was good at this.
Right.
And I think we all need to be seen and recognized. The same reason why, for a lot of us, it's about the consumer being, having that being gratified. Like when you do the thing for them and you see that gratification, it's the same thing for your employee. Like when you're like, wow, like you're good at this. Like I'm so pleased with your performance. I'm so impressed by your ability. That shit lights people up. And that's what makes people fall in love with their work, is when they are valued and seen.
Yes.
And I don't think we do enough of that. What are your thoughts as I'm sharing this?
I mean, I agree.
Yeah.
I think we do a great job in my company doing that because we've made that a priority.
Yeah.
But I think in the industry as a whole, it's terrible. It's terrible. We're awful at it. And that's why people leave. The same scenario that I just described with that employee who graduated from college. It's not. Imagine that same employee is excited about working at a restaurant and is inspired and ready to go, and then the boss comes and just takes their day out of them. Something had nothing to do with them, just destroys them. After a really long shift of getting destroyed by a bunch of rude customers and all this stuff, they don't make a ton of money. And the fates aligned in a way that's really, really negative. And I think we've all had that shift, if not many shifts like that. What's the threshold for tolerance? Sooner or later, you're going to be like, what? This is fucking ridiculous. What am I doing here? I'm done with this. I graduated from college. Why am I working in this place? And you leave. Doesn't matter if the manager found out that their dog had been run over by a car, and it doesn't matter that the customers that came in that day, were celebrating a divorce and got drunk and took out their hate of their ex-husband on you. It doesn't matter. Yeah. What matters is how you feel. And if you had been in an environment where you were receiving consistent positive support from the people that you worked for, you'll be able to tolerate a shift like that.
Yeah.
You're going, you know what? Fuck, that's a cost of doing business. There is not a career that I've heard of where you don't have a day that's tough.
You got to increase the pros to balance the cons.
Totally.
Right? And I mean, back to this idea of equity. Wow, I can't talk right now. Equitable. Jesus,
equitable.
Man, say it for me. Thank you very much. Equitable. Thank you. Wow, that was painful. This idea of equitable, equality. Right. What needs to happen in our industry to achieve equitable equality?
The first thing, 100%. is recognizing there's an enormous pay gap between the front of the house and the back of the house.
So what has to change to fix that?
The back house has to make more money.
Where are we going to get the money?
Well, we do Tip the Kitchen. We developed a system called Tip the Kitchen. There are other restaurants that do it, but we kind of modeled a very specific approach, which is to encourage our customers to tip if there's a worthy experience, and then matching those tips up to $500 a day per store. And that alone has made a monumental difference in our company. That has been the game changer in our company, because it's put an awful lot more money in the pockets of people that really needed it.
Yeah.
And as a byproduct of that, it's kept more people on our payroll for longer, and thusly makes it a viable industry to potentially have a career in. That's I mean, right now, the scenario I just described of that senior in high school or college who has a tough shift or whatever, that shift is happening very, very frequently right now. This isn't news to anybody. There's a staffing crisis across the board in all industries, but especially in the restaurant business. And people are short-staffed, and customers are dealing with their post-COVID trauma and just taking it out on staff left and right. There are a lot of excuses to walk away from our industry right now.
Yeah.
Especially if you're not making money.
Do you think the staffing issue is going to change?
Yeah.
Do you think it's going to recover?
Totally.
Is there anything you're doing to evolve your concepts to be able to go forward if the staffing issue continues to get worse?
We don't have a staffing issue.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not fair. We have a staffing issue in so much as that, like, we would like to always be able to find good people.
Yeah.
And
Layers
maybe
of
better people. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Better people sounds terrible, but better at what they're hired to do, I guess is a good way of saying it. And so because of Tip the Kitchen, our kitchens are staffed and almost fully staffed all the time. Whereas I think 95% of restaurants that exist right now cannot say that.
Mm-hmm.
As a result, the food comes out faster. As a result, the relationship between the front of house and the back of house is better, because the back of house is excited that the servers are earning them tips.
Yeah.
And so your culture is better. And that it's like a vicious cycle, except in reverse, where everything is feeding in a positive way. And so, I think the solution to the staffing crisis is two parts. One is to ensure an environment where people can be treated fairly, and I mean that economically, I also mean that emotionally and psychologically, and also one where they can see a real viable pathway to growth if that's what they want. If you don't see it going anywhere, then what the fuck are you doing here?
Yeah.
You could get hired in any industry right now for more pay than you could ever have been paid before.
Yeah.
Why are you staying in this industry? If not because it's viable.
Any other things, when reflecting on what the state of the industry is, what needs to change about our industry, anything else that you want to bring to the conversation as far as what we should create awareness about? If enough people knew about this, then we could make change.
I mean, we mentioned it earlier, and I think this is a really important point, is what you read about a restaurant on a review site is total BS.
Yeah.
It's 3% max of your total customer base. Since we opened Five Church Charlotte, I think we have like 800 reviews on Yelp. We've had over 1 million customers. But Yelp pays to have their SEO promoted. So if you Google Five Church, and I've said this before, but if you Google Five Church, the number 2 or 3 item is Yelp.
Yeah.
In spite of the fact that it's so disproportionately representative of what people are saying about us. That is a total nonsense, and it empowers the worst kind of behavior. If I have a great experience at a restaurant, I don't go running to my computer. I go to my friends.
Yeah.
Hey, you got to go try out Lewis's Barbecue in Charleston. Which, by the way, if you're ever there, you should go there. It's awesome.
Sounds good.
Like that's what you should be doing. But if you go and read online, it's like this nonstop barrage of petty grievances that nobody really reads except for the restaurants. It's so demoralizing.
Well, what's interesting is the restaurant industry is not leading the change. There's this industry between the consumer and the restaurant. It's all these tech companies that are trying to. We're not the beneficiary of all the things that are happening in the industry. We react to it. Things are happening. Other industries, tech industries, are influencing our industry, trying to make things more convenient for the consumer. But at what cost? Are we for convenience? What are we giving up?
Well, it goes two ways, right? It goes two ways because we have to put up with the bullshit, right, of other people making money off of what we do. But it also means that we're not replaceable.
Yeah.
You can't, like Blue Apron, okay, whatever, but you can't replicate the experience of going out to a full service restaurant and having dinner.
Yeah.
Whereas you can replicate the experience of going to a mall with Amazon.
Yeah.
Right? I can go online and I can buy an iPhone right now and not have to go into a store and wait in line. You cannot replicate that with restaurants. And so I think it's sort of a double-edged sword, which is that you have to tolerate the fact that Uber Eats and Postmates and all these guys, and then Open Table and Yelp are sort of parasitic businesses. Open Table is more functional, but are parasitic businesses that live off of the discussions about restaurants or about the products sold by restaurants. But it's because you can't replace us. You might be able to replace an individual restaurant, but there will always be a desire to go out to eat.
One of the things that drives me is bringing the industry together, uniting the industry, and opening up a dialogue where we're all on the same page. Because I think if we're on the same page, then we can start to band together and be like, if we all choose to give a giant middle finger to whoever is trying to control the narrative, then if we're collective, we stick together, can really determine the success of anybody, because they need us to be a part of it, right?
Sure.
They need us to buy into whatever is going on. So if we just say no, screw off,
right?
Then I think that people need our participation to have their business be successful.
Well, it's funny because if you. So I did this Twitter feed recently where the Charlotte Observer actually picked it up and ran the story, and he was talking about the comparison of local restaurants versus corporate restaurants, and why Charlotte's culinary scene has struggled at times because of this dominance of corporate restaurants and the lack of privately owned restaurants. And that's not really the point. The point is, when I ran the story, I got an enormous amount of negative feedback. I mean, people were like, fuck you, because I basically called out customers. I called out our guests.
Good.
And it's funny to see how much people can't deal with getting called out. Now, as a restaurant owner, I read negative things about what I do and what I care about, what I spend my entire life doing every single day. And I read really hateful, petty, insane shit all the time. If you point at somebody who's being unreasonable and say, hey, you're being unreasonable, they lose their mind. They can't deal with it. And to me, that's the root of a lot of poison in our industry, is that the pendulum has swung too far towards the customer's always right.
We've conditioned the customer.
We've made it okay for them.
We made this okay. Yeah, it's our fault.
Now, I've gotten into a couple... I probably shouldn't talk about this, but I've gotten a couple incidents with guests where I'm like...
Earmuffs.
I'm like, you can't do that. Like, no, I don't want your business. I don't want your money. If you're going to be disrespectful to my customer, to my staff, or to my team, or to my store, just get the fuck out.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing here?
But I think it's important because we have created this dialogue that says the consumer is always right, and hospitality is about generosity. It's about giving, and yes, but we've gotten to a point where the consumer is treating every restaurant like it's a multi-billion-dollar corporation that has the ability to absorb dishonesty and greed, and that's exactly what it is. But the small business owner can't absorb that,
and they're the ones who are punished the most by it. I mean, Darden Food Group could give a shit about your 1-star review on Yelp of Capital Grill. They don't care. I mean, they probably have some infrastructure that evaluates it, but it's not going to affect them. Okay, their stock price isn't going down because you gave their filet a 1-star review, whereas the new place on the corner that so desperately needs positive feedback, if you go in with the same petty attitude, that's going to hurt them, that 1-star review, because they only have 3 versus thousands. To me, the accountability does not stop with the restaurant ownership and management, and I think that they have a lot to do with it. I think that there's a lot of, frankly, blood on their hands, but I think the customers are a huge part of the problem, and nobody wants to talk about it because they pay the bills.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
But I think that's what we need to transition from being a reactive industry to a proactive industry, and saying, listen, there's a lot broken with the food system, and if we're going to make changes, you need to understand what the problems are, because your dollars are going to directly influence the future.
But doesn't that start with the perception that our industry is viable? And it's going back to what I was saying before, is that if people don't perceive the restaurant industry as a viable industry, which most people do not, frankly, it's really hard, and 90% of restaurants fail in the first year, and all this bad data that's just sort of floating around all the time about what we do, and you're all drug addicts and alcoholics and this. When you can eliminate that, when you could do what Danny Meyer did, and eliminate all that and be like, no, we're serious businesses that do remarkable revenue that feed thousands, if not millions of people, and needs to be taken seriously. I think when you can do that, the noise, the BS starts to fade, and you focus in on the product and the process.
Yes, Patrick, I'm loving the conversation. I could keep on going with you, but I got to respect your time. And I have to ask you, we talked about what needs to transform in the restaurant industry, but again, mission to inspire, empower, and transform the industry. How have you personally transformed? Because I think if we're going to transform the industry, we need to transform one person at a time. Mm-hmm. So how have you evolved over time?
I think success has an amazing way to humble you. I think when you're successful, when you've had a taste of success, you realize that your success is a byproduct of so many people working hard, buying into your vision, coming in at 2:00 in the morning to do inventory or whatever, and that you can't do anything on that level by yourself. And so when you have success, it there's two ways you can go with it. You can get a big ego and think that you're hot shit and all, or you can, which is some people, or you can have the reality check that your success is a real responsibility, and that you made promises to people, not just the people that count on you financially to open the business and to run it profitably, but rather the people that work for you and then the people that come into your store. It's very, very humbling. When I say 1 million people have come into Five Church Charlotte, that's a very humbling number. Yeah. And so having perspective and being aware of how unusual the circumstances are, and being grateful for it is a big change. Not change, but it's what I've learned the most about this business.
Beautiful. Patrick, I've loved this conversation. All right, so we're back, and the first question I have for you is, what is your it factor, a habit, a trait, a characteristic you believe most contributes to your success?
I'm a very good public speaker.
Just kidding. Yeah, this has been great.
Well, this isn't public. This is a podcast. But
Yeah.
I think I'm good at speaking in public.
I would back that up. What is one of your biggest weaknesses?
I'm impatient.
What is one question you ask or thing you look for when you're growing your team, when you're interviewing people?
What do you want to do?
What's the answer you're looking for?
I want to own my own restaurant.
What's the biggest challenge you're dealing with today?
Unreasonable people.
How are you dealing with that challenge?
Right now I'm screaming in their faces. No, trying to be patient.
Just offer perspective too.
Yeah,
right?
trying to respond to unreasonable people with reasonable responses.
Where is this unreasonable? Where are these people coming from?
It's just everywhere.
What is one code of conduct or behavior you teach your team? This is a core value, a way to be.
Sure. Say what you mean and do what you say.
What is one uncommon standard of service you teach your team? So something that's common
Sure.
within the four walls of your restaurants, but not common throughout the industry.
We're highly unscripted at tables. We're very our staff and our guests are very creative.
That was the one thing that killed me when I tried to be a server is that I went to a restaurant group that was very scripted, and I have the most horrible memory. I just can't. I get so worried about how I'm going to say things that it's not exactly right.
Isn't that the opposite of what we're trying to do?
Yeah.
Like, isn't the purpose to have a personal interaction with somebody in a way that's at least somewhat reasonable? And how can I have that if somebody's just vomiting some pre-programmed shit?
Yeah.
That they're, I'm going to talk to your table, and I'm going to go to the table 1 foot away and say the exact same script. It's like, it's
so
as
much for a
insincere
unique
as
experience, right?
Yeah.
What is one book that's a must-read to make us a better person or restaurant owner you can't say Danny Meyer saying the table?
I mean, Set the Table is a great book. That's a good question. The Art of War.
Beautiful. What was the biggest lesson from that book?
To expand your territory, you need to divide the spoils.
What is one thing you feel restaurateurs don't do well enough or often enough?
Share information with their employees.
Yes. Specifically what information?
Financial and just any kind of decision making. Like, why are we doing this? You're not doing something because I told you to. You're doing it because you're doing it because I told you also, but you're doing it because it makes sense, and here's the reasons why.
These next two questions, the point of these questions is to help good people connect with good people. So what is one service you've hired or outsourced? Not a technology, but something that a group of people do better than you could ever do yourself or in-house.
we have a group out of Nashville, our architectural design services, the Bradley Projects, and they're excellent. And I've been through a lot of architects and a lot of contractors over the years, and these guys are a cut above and have been amazing to work with and provide real insight that I just don't. Not only do I not have, but I couldn't have.
I love it. And what is one technology that you've recently adopted and implemented in your business that's had a huge impact on communication, efficiency, profitability, anything along those lines?
Technology? I mean, Tip the Kitchen, but that's not really technology. We just adapted. We just brought in a Vero Slingshot, which I think is a really interesting tool.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Vero was with Compete or Absorb Compete C28, which is now Restaurant 365.
Exactly.
And what's the biggest impact that's had on your business?
You're able to review your performance in a lot of different ways, rather than just saying, okay, our most popular dish is the fried chicken or is the filet mignon. Now you're able to say, well, our most popular dish when it's raining, or Joe's most popular. Joe the server has a preponderance for selling sea bass, or something.
So I'm really curious, and this is something that's come up recently that maybe a year ago I would have said, if you're opening a restaurant, don't maybe go with like QuickBooks or something like that. But now I'm starting to wonder if it's better if your hope is to scale, if your hope is to grow, is it worth investing, budgeting for technology like Restaurant 365 from day one? What's your perspective on that or opinion?
We don't even. Oh, excuse me, I just banged the microphone. We don't even look at our financials at our businesses for the first 6 months of operations. We don't even look.
What's the reason for that?
Because you can't. It's confusing, and it's you don't know where your priorities need to be. The priority. Okay, someone comes into your restaurant. The number one thing that they want is to feel good. They don't give a fuck about what they're going to spend. They don't. I mean, they care, but they don't care. Especially a place like Five Church or Church and Union. And so, the first step is to make sure that you are providing to your customers what they want.
Yeah, you're still in MVP mode, minimal viable product. You're
totally.
You're looking for feedback. You're pivoting. You're adapting. You don't know what you are yet. So what's the point of tracking?
So the first 3 years of your ops, let's say the first 2 years of your operations, like you don't even know why you're profiting if you are profiting. You don't know what you're doing well or what you're not doing. I mean, you might know some things, but you don't have a mastery of it like we were discussing before. And so until you have a mastery of it, hire an accountant that's good. Hire somebody who's got all that software. And that can relay to you the numbers in a way where you can rely on them to make decisions about your operations, but don't make a whole lot of decisions in your operations based on financials the first couple of years you're open.
Got it. This is the last question.
If you can. I mean, some people are, sometimes you're undercapitalized, so you don't have a choice. In fact, this is the number one reason why restaurants fail is like you don't have money. And so you need to get that information, but as much as you can, try to make decisions based on what you believe is going to make your guests happier rather than it's going to make you more money.
We just did a whole workshop with Stephanie Robson on that subject of building basically like a runway, like your what's the I can't remember the exact term she used to identify the workshop, but the idea of just really getting realistic with how much money it's going to take to be open and how long of a runway you're going to need to get to the point where you're profitable, and like looking at every detail, every expense. It's super important.
I mean, Five Church Charleston took 3 years to turn a profit, and now it's like a juggernaut. Now it's doing numbers that are comparable to like Manhattan and Vegas.
Yeah. Okay, this is the last question. It's a doozy.
Oh boy.
So listen closely and be ready. If you got the news, you'd be leaving this world tomorrow. All the memories of your work in your restaurants would be gone with your departure, with the exception of 3 pieces of wisdom that you could leave behind for the good of humanity, for your legacy, to pay it forward to the next generation. What would those 3 pieces of wisdom be?
Be empathetic.
1.
Be reasonable.
2.
And work hard.
3. Patrick, I've loved this conversation, man. You were great. We wrap up every chat by calling somebody out. This is really how I'm trying to pivot the podcast to be the most trusted resource out there. Who do you respect and admire and believe would be a great guest mentor like you made for us today?
Sure. I don't know him personally, but I've read a bit about him, and I've been to his restaurants many times. John Lewis, I just mentioned Lewis's Barbecue earlier. I think I've been to that restaurant, I don't even want to admit how many times, probably 50 times. And I have never had anything even 5% different one way or the other from an excellent experience.
Wow.
And that is, I mean, in my world, that's extraordinary. In the world of people who are listening, that's not hyperbole. That's a fact, and it's extraordinary. So whatever he's doing is amazing, and I would love to hear what he has to say.
John Lewis, look, I'm coming after you. I'd love to get you on the show. And how can we connect with you if we really resonated with your story today?
Sure.
We're looking to join a new group, and maybe we were interested in coming to work with you.
Sure. Well, we have all the social media platforms. I think the ones that I think people would be interested in, related to me personally, is we have a Tip the Kitchen Twitter page, which is tip_kitchen. And where I literally publish all of our numbers every week.
Wow.
Of all the restaurants, including revenue, everything, just to show how that system works.
Is this a closed group for your employees? Is it open to
No, this is the public. I mean, I've been publishing our revenue, which I was taught, never tell anybody the numbers you're doing and this and that. I don't give a shit. I want people to know.
That's like my dream and I hope I encourage, and people will say, why would you share your plan for the future? You're going to have, I want more people to do this. That's the whole point. I think open book management needs to be something that doesn't just end at our four walls.
Mm-hmm.
I think open book management needs to be open to the industry so we can look and share and help each other and literally have all ships rise with the tide.
I mean,
right?
we're over
What's
the hump.
Bad thing that will happen.
Right, we're over the hump. My company's over the hump. We survived COVID. We're very successful. We've been doing great business, and I don't think that's going to change. And now I believe it's our responsibility to try to afford other people the same good opportunities that we've had by providing either information or just the chance. And so that's what we do.
John, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed John. I just looked John Lewis. You just said it. Patrick, thank you so. Maybe you should just edit. I wasn't.
No, it's okay. Maybe I'll go by John today.
I don't know why I said that. I apologize.
Can you guys call me John, please, for the rest of the day too? Okay.
Patrick, thank you so much, man. This conversation was great. There is no questioning. You are unstoppable.
Thank you, sir.
Cheers. Thank you.